Hey guys, it's Madison. Today I'm going to be talking about episodes 7 and 8 of the new adaptation of Stephen King's The Stand. Since we are almost to the end of this series, there's going to be non-stop spoilers in this video. Plus there's going to be spoilers about the book and the previous miniseries, so if you haven't seen it and you don't know how The Stand ends, you might want to stop watching this video. So episode 7 starts with the aftermath of the bomb that Harold and Nadine set off. Nadine attempts to touch Harold's hand, possibly in comfort or solidarity, and then Harold pulls away and tells her that there will be no more of that because Flagg is going to give him a girl that will make her look like a potato sack. Ouch. Later on, she basically runs Harold off the road and causes him to have an accident because you never tell a girl that she looks like a potato sack, and because presumably Flagg told her to do so. Harold is furious at being betrayed and he tries to shoot Nadine, but she coolly walks off and leaves him to die. Meanwhile, in Boulder, Mother Abigail tells them all that Stu, Ray, and Glenn must walk to Vegas on foot and take nothing with them right before she dies. The scene is intense, and for once, the subdued reactions work really well. Fran looks heartbroken that Stu is being called upon to leave them, and the scene that follows, where she makes Stu promise to come back to her and that God can't control all of it, is one of the best scenes in this show. When the show cuts back to Harold, he is hilariously clutching his payday candy bar to his chest as he waits for help or death. They never do answer the question of whether or not he finishes his candy bar, but I'm gonna assume he did. Then they show Harold writing in his journal, but we don't hear or see what he's writing, and then he sticks his gun in his mouth and blows his brains out in a super anticlimactic scene. But they do make up for it later, whenever Larry and the group find Harold's dead body. In a cruel twist of fate, Harold, who goes by Hawk, gets his face eaten by hawks. Okay, they were probably vultures, but for the sake of cruel ironic twists, let's just say they were hawks. At this point, the voiceover starts and we hear Harold's speech that's pulled straight out of the book, where he talks about this game that the kids used to play where they would jump across this gravel pit and into the sand, and how he was always too scared to jump and how he got bullied for it, which is sort of what led to him becoming socially isolated and becoming the person that he was that was able to be so easily manipulated by Flagg. He says, "If I had been able to jump just once, I might not be here." I'm so glad that they included this in the show because it's one of my favorite parts of the book, and it was a really fitting end for Harold's character. Later on, Stu breaks his leg just like he does in the original series. They patch him up with a large stick and some strips of cloth, also known in America as the basic healthcare coverage plan. After this, Stu tells Larry that he's the leader now, and Larry's like, "Why me? Like, seriously, dude, why me? Everyone who's a leader ends up dying. Make it Ray or Glenn. Come on, man, I thought we were friends." Nadine begins having sex with Flagg, and then it turns into a brutal sexual assault, much like it does in the original story. Unlike the original story, Nadine is still around to greet Larry and his group whenever they arrive in Vegas, and she is about to pop with Flagg's demon baby. I thought episode 7 was really good. It was a fitting end to Harold's character, and they followed the book more closely than the original in terms of how they showed Harold's death, with Stu's group coming across Harold's body. And the changes they did make, such as Nadine living long enough to greet Larry and his group when they arrived in Vegas, promised that it would have interesting outcomes, which they delivered on in the next episode. The only thing that frustrated me about this episode is that we never get an explanation from Flagg about why Harold had to die. All we hear from Flagg is Harold was loyal, but he was never meant to ascend to Olympus to live among the gods like you. What the heck? Harold was smart, loyal, good at making bombs, which is kind of important in a war, and yet he wasn't meant to come to Vegas? Loyal and smart are the perfect traits for a henchman. The fact that Flagg thought that Lloyd was a good second in command but not Harold just goes to show how incompetent Flagg is as a leader. That and the fact that he thought Trash Can Man made a good henchman at all. My theory is that in this series, Flagg's decision really comes down to fear. He could be afraid that Harold is too ambitious and too smart, and that he might possibly try to take over and could possibly succeed or at least cause more trouble than he was worth. That's the only explanation I can think of for why Flagg would kill someone so useful. My issue isn't that Flagg killed Harold, it's that we never got an explanation for why. Understanding character motivation is kind of important, and we literally had 3 good reasons in this series why Flagg could have wanted Harold dead. The first one being the reason I just mentioned, that he was afraid that Harold could try to take over. The second reason is the one that's mentioned in the book and the original miniseries, which is that Flagg thought that someone that betrayed one side might betray the other. Basically meaning that Flagg doubted Harold's loyalty, which is the opposite of what Flagg says here. And lastly, this series introduced the possibility that Harold could resent Nadine and thus Flagg for killing Teddy, which would have also given Teddy's storyline some purpose. But nope, it's just a shame because Harold was really the star of this series. The execution of his death was done very well, but the lack of explanation was kind of disappointing. Really, it would have just taken 1 or 2 sentences for Flagg to explain why Harold had to die, and it would have gone so far. And now on to episode 8. This episode begins with the trial of Glenn, Larry, and Ray. This scene is completely original to the miniseries, and I kind of wish that this had been in the original story as a way to expand the third act and to show more direct interaction between the people of Vegas and Boulder. Either way, it is one of my favorite scenes in the show. It kind of seemed at one point that Glenn was going to convince a bunch of people to turn against Flagg, and I definitely think that he planted the seeds that later took root towards the end of this episode whenever people did begin rebelling against him. I think that it would have been interesting to see this story take a detour from the original ending and have Flagg's people turn against him and maybe kill him instead of going for the Hand of God ending again. Although I do think with a story like this that has so many religious elements driving the story, that a supernatural event at the climax feels almost mandatory. I'm just saying that I think that it would have been interesting to see the effects of Glenn's speech on the people of Vegas and to see the repercussions of that, had they had more time to explore that storyline. In the book, Lloyd kills Glenn on Flagg's orders, and in this series, Lloyd is terrified that Flagg will be furious at him for killing Glenn without his permission. However, Flagg is pretty indifferent because at this point, Nadine has just thrown herself out the window in order to kill herself and the demon spawn inside of her after she realizes that Flagg never intended for her to survive her pregnancy. She also seems partially influenced by her conversation with Larry after he shows her how the demon baby inside of her is basically turning her into a walking corpse. This scene is one of my favorite original additions to the show because it doesn't just feel like gratuitous fan service, it actually serves a purpose in influencing Nadine's decision to kill herself. Afterwards, they bring Nadine's head to Larry in an attempt to psychologically torture him, but it backfires because it makes Larry see how their organization is falling apart. And he's not wrong. Also, Nadine's nasty remains is one of the most disgusting things that they've shown on this show, and it's one of the nastiest things that I've seen in general in a long time. It was a great visual. After all of this, Lloyd is very shaken, mostly by Larry's humanity and his conviction that Flagg and his society will fall. As Larry and Ray are taken to a pool to be publicly drowned, Trash Can Man sneaks in with a bomb that is about to go off at the story's climax. Lloyd shows his humanity at what is literally almost the last minute. He actually attempts to free Larry and Ray even though we, the audience, know that it's too late. I actually thought that Flagg was going to kill Lloyd, and I think that that could have been more interesting than seeing Lloyd get clocked or possibly decapitated by a piece of falling infrastructure. But I think that there was just so much going on in that scene that they didn't want to focus too much on Lloyd's death. After a mysterious cloud appears and begins striking people down with lightning one by one, the bomb goes off. Stu sees light from the bomb and he knows that Vegas is gone now. Instead of having Nick leave Tom to Stu in order to save him, Kojak does it. Yeah, that's right. They cut another one of Nick's scenes, arguably his most important one. They just keep doing my boy Nick dirty, and I don't know why. I'm hoping they bring him back in the finale somehow so that his character doesn't feel like a complete waste. Like maybe Nick's Force Ghost will somehow lead Stu and Tom away from danger. Probably not. At this point, I have to wonder why they even bothered putting Nick in the show. They could have cut him out like Lucy considering how little they actually used him. Overall, aside from cutting yet another Nick scene, it does feel like they really did justice to this part of the book. Although I can't say I agree with all of the changes this miniseries has made, I do feel as if the last 2 episodes have been some of the best of the series. We are now past the climax of this story, and I feel like the last episode is basically just going to be an epilogue, but I'm still really excited to see where they go next. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I'll be reviewing the finale very soon. I also do book reviews on this channel, give horror commentary, and writing advice. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you later.